The microphone was still warm in Nanaya Owusu's hand when Min Woo Seo told 200 people that her 4 years at Dayang Partners were over. She had just finished presenting. The room had applauded. She was walking back to her seat when he stepped up to the podium, looked at the card in his hand instead of at her, and said her name the way a man reads an item off an agenda. Effective immediately. Thank you all for your time. 90 seconds. That was the whole thing. 90 seconds to end a career she had crossed a continent to build in front of every person whose respect she had spent 4 years earning. And he did not look at her once. Not when he said it, not when security walked her to the lift, not when the doors closed. She spent 6 months believing he had destroyed her for sport. He spent 6 months letting her believe it. If your chest is already tight, you are exactly where you need to be. Hit that like button and drop your city or country in the comments below so I can see how far this story has traveled. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens when the woman he destroyed walks back into that building with his name sitting underneath hers on the org chart. Let us begin. The first month, she did not tell anyone in Accra. Her mother called every Sunday and asked about the weather in Seoul and whether she was eating, and Nanaya said the weather was cold and the food was fine, and she said it from a one-room flat in Sinchon with the heating turned down to save 11,000 won a week. The second month, she started applying. She was good at this part. She had built a career on being the person in the room who had read the whole document, and her record was clean, and her Korean was better than most of the foreigners in the industry and better than some of the Koreans in her old team. She sent 41 applications in 9 days. She got 4 interviews. She got no offers. By the third interview, she understood what was happening because the third interviewer was kind enough or careless enough to say it out loud. He asked her gently why a person would be terminated at an all-hands meeting rather than quietly, and when she said she did not know, he wrote something down and did not look up again. That was the mechanism. Nobody had to say she was a problem. Min Woo had said it for them in front of 200 witnesses in the most public room in the company. Firing a person quietly means the market assumes a disagreement. Firing a person in front of an audience means the market assumes a reason. She stopped sending applications in the 4th month. She took contract work instead, small pieces, model reviews for firms too small to care about her file, 300,000 won here, 500,000 there. She was reviewing the capital structure of a logistics startup at 2 in the morning when she realized she was doing the same work she had done at Dayang for 1/12 of the money for people who would never let her sign anything. Abena told her to come home. Abena had come to Seoul the same year, teaching English in Nawon, and she was the only person in the country who had known Nanaya before Dayang, which meant she was the only person whose opinion did not depend on a resume. She said Ghana was still there. She said there was no shame in it. Nanaya said she was not finished. Abena said that was not the same as being all right, and Nanaya did not have an answer for that, so she changed the subject. In the 5th month, she almost got one. It was a mid-sized asset manager in Yewido, and the process ran 4 rounds, and by the 4th round, the partner interviewing her had stopped asking questions and started describing the team she would be building. He told her the offer would come Monday. He shook her hand with both of his. The offer did not come Monday. It did not come Tuesday. On Wednesday, a junior in his office rang to say the role was put on hold
pending a review of headcount, and he said it so quickly and apologized so much that she understood he had been told to make the call because the partner did not want to. She rang the partner anyway. She was not proud of it. He took the call, which she had not expected, and he was quiet for a while, and then he said that he had made one reference call, as a formality, and that the person on the other end had not said anything negative about her at all. He had simply declined to comment, twice, politely. That was all it took. Not an accusation, an absence of one from a firm that fired her in front of 200 witnesses, which the market read as a man being too decent to say the obvious thing out loud. She thanked him for his honesty. She hung up. Then she sat on the floor of the flat in Sinchon with her back against the fridge for a very long time. And when she finally got up, she did not cry. She opened her laptop and started the contract work because the rent was due on the 9th and grief does not move a date. What Nanaya did not know, because nobody outside the building knew, was that Dayang partners had been dying since the week she left.
Not because of her. That was not the shape of it. Dayang had been dying for 2 years and had been very good at hiding it. And the hiding had been the whole job of the 11th floor, where the capital approvals lived. Min Woo-seo had spent those 2 years signing things that made a slow bleed look like a strategy. And by the spring, the bleed had outrun the strategy. In March, Koryo Group made an offer. It was not generous. It was the kind of offer a large firm makes when it knows the smaller firm has nowhere else to be. Dayang's board accepted it in a single afternoon, and the acquisition closed in June. And every Dayang employee above a certain grade was told they would be assessed by a Koryo Integration Committee over 90 days, after which the duplicated roles would be cut. Min Woo learned the name of the committee's incoming head from a document he was not supposed to open until the following Monday. He opened it on the Friday, at his desk, alone, at 9 in the evening. He read the name twice. Then he put both hands flat on the desk and sat there without moving for a long time, which was what he did when a thing had already been decided and there was nothing left to arrange. Nanaya found out on a Tuesday from Koryo's head of talent, who called her at 10 in the morning and spoke for 11 minutes and did not once mention Dayang. Koryo had been watching her work. Not the Dayang work, the contract work, the small reviews for the small firms, one of which had been a Koryo portfolio company and one of whose founders had told a Koryo partner that the best analysis he had ever paid for cost him 400,000 won and came from a Ghanaian woman working out of a flat in Sinchon. They offered her a directorship. They offered her the integration review for a mid-sized acquisition, 90 days, full authority over structural recommendations, reporting directly to Chairman Roh. She said yes before she asked which acquisition. She asked afterwards, and the head of talent said the name, and Nanaya stood very still in her own kitchen and listened to her heart move in her ears. She could have said no. She thought about it for 2 days. She thought about the lift doors closing. She thought about the third interviewer writing something down. Then she opened the org chart Koryo had sent her and she scrolled down through the Dayang structure to the 11th floor, and there was his name sitting in a box with a line running up out of it, and the line ran to her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she straightened the cuff of her left sleeve, which was what she did before walking into a room where she was outnumbered, and she typed a single line back to the head of talent, confirming she would start on the 1st. She was in the building by 7:40 on the first morning because she wanted to be sitting down before anyone else arrived. It did not work. Min Woo was already there. He was in the corridor outside the 11th floor conference room with a stack of files under his arm, and he stopped when he saw her, and for about 2 seconds, neither of them did anything at all. Then he inclined his head and said, "Good morning, Director Owusu,"
and stepped aside to let her pass. "Director Owusu," he said it flatly, the way he said everything, and it landed on her like a hand on a bruise, because that was the same voice. That was the exact same voice that read her name off a card in front of 200 people, and it had not changed by a single degree. And she understood in that corridor that she had been imagining a version of this morning in which he would be diminished, and he was not diminished, and she was going to have to do this anyway. She said good morning and walked past him and did not look back. The first committee session ran 3 hours. She chaired it. There were 9 people at the table, 6 from Koryo and 3 from Daeyang. And Ji-yoon Han was Daeyang's senior director of finance and had survived every restructure the firm had ever run. And she arrived at the session 10 minutes late with coffee and apologies and the particular warmth of a person who has decided in advance exactly how much of it to spend. She told Nanaya it was so good to see her again. She said it with real feeling. She said the whole floor had been devastated, absolutely devastated, and that she had personally thought the way it was handled was unforgivable. Then she said, still smiling, that she thought it was wonderful that Koryo was taking diversity in leadership so seriously because it sent such a strong signal to the market, and she hoped the review would not be too much pressure so early in a first directorship. She laughed one syllable with her mouth closed and picked up her coffee. The table went quiet in the specific way tables go quiet when everyone has heard something and nobody intends to be the one to name it. Nanaya did not name it either. She straightened the cuff of her left sleeve and she said that the review timetable was on page 2 and that she would need the 11th floor's capital approval records for the last 36 months delivered by Thursday. Ji-yoon said, of course. She said it warmly. She wrote nothing down.
At the far end of the table, Min Woo-seo looked up for the first time in 3 hours. Let me stop us there for a second, because I need to say something about that room. 9 people heard what Ji-yoon said, and not one of them opened their mouth. And if you have ever been the only person who looks like you in a room like that, you already know what that silence weighs. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in that chair, not what you would have felt, what you would have actually said out loud on your first morning with your job 3 days old. I read every single one of these. Now, let us get back to it. The 90 days did not begin dramatically. They began with spreadsheets. That was the part Nanaya had not expected, and the part she turned out to be very good at, because a merger review is not a series of confrontations. It is a very long argument about numbers, conducted almost entirely in writing, and she had been doing that argument for 4 years already inside this exact company. She knew where Daeyang buried things. She knew that the 11th floor ran its approvals through a workflow that generated a signature record and a separate authorization record, and that nobody ever reconciled the two, because reconciling them was a 2-week job that no director had ever been willing to fund. She knew that the property portfolio was valued on a model she personally flagged as optimistic in her 2nd year and had been told to leave alone. She stopped leaving it alone. By the end of the 3rd week, the committee had a revised valuation that was 31% below the figure Daeyang had presented to Koryo during due diligence, and Chairman Roh asked her in writing whether she was confident, and she wrote back 1 line saying she was, and attached 90 pages. The Daeyang side hated her. That was fine. She had expected it, and it did not cost her anything, because the Daeyang side had already watched her be humiliated once and had already decided what she was, and there was nothing left in that direction to lose. What did cost her was the signing. In week 4, the committee's first structural recommendation went out, and it eliminated the operations support function on the 7th floor. And it did so because the analysis was correct, and the function had been duplicated inside Koryo for 11 years, and there was no honest argument for keeping it. 19 people.
She had eaten lunch with some of them for 4 years. She signed it on a Tuesday morning. Then she went down to the 7th floor and stood in the corridor for a while and did not go in because there was no version of walking in there that was worse for them than staying out. One of them found her anyway, a woman named Sun-hee, who had run the 7th floor scheduling for 9 years and who had been, in the week Nanaya was fired, one of exactly 2 people in the building who sent her a message afterwards. She did not shout. She asked quite calmly whether Nanaya knew when she took the job that this was what the job was. Nanaya said yes. Soon he nodded and said that at least she had not lied about it, and walked back to her desk. That was the week Nanaya stopped sleeping properly. Not because she thought the finding was wrong. She knew it was right, and she would have written it identically from any chair in any company. And that was precisely the problem, because she had spent 7 months telling herself that what had been done to her was done by a man who did not care what it cost, and she was now discovering how easy it was to be that man when the numbers were on your side. She did not say that out loud to anyone. She wrote it once in a note on her phone at 2 in the morning and deleted it before she slept. What she had not expected was Min-woo. He did not fight her, not once. Every document she requested arrived early. Every question she asked, he answered fully, in writing, without hedging, including the ones where the honest answer made him look negligent. When she asked for the 11th floor's approval records, he sent them within 4 hours, complete, unredacted, including 3 approvals with his own signature on them that she flagged the same day as structurally improper. She kept waiting for the resistance and it kept not arriving. And after a while, the absence of it started to feel like its own kind of statement, and she couldn't work out what it was saying. Once late, she found him still at his desk at 9 at night, going through a box of physical files, and she asked him what he was looking for, and he said he was checking something, and she asked what, and he put both hands flat on the desk and said it was nothing that would affect her review. She said that was not an answer. He said it was the only one he had. The committee's interim finding went to Chairman Roh in week 6, and it recommended that 11 Dayang roles be eliminated and that the 11th floor's approval function be dissolved entirely and rebuilt under Koryo governance. It named Min Woo-seo's position as redundant. She wrote that line herself. She read it back 4 times before she submitted it, and she could not find a single thing in it that was not true. Chairman Roh convened the full committee to review the interim finding, and it was in that session, in front of all 9 members plus 2 Koryo partners, that June made her move.
She did it well. She was not crude about it. She raised, as a matter of governance, a concern that the review's lead had a documented prior relationship with the acquired entity, that she had been separated from that entity under circumstances the committee had not examined, and that the finding, which happened to eliminate the position of the executive who had separated her, might reasonably be perceived by the market as personal. She said she raised it reluctantly. She said she raised it only to protect Director Owusu from the perception. She laughed 1 syllable with her mouth closed. Nanaya felt the room turn. She felt it physically, the way you feel a train pass on the other platform, and she understood that Jion had built this carefully, that she had waited 6 weeks for a session with partners in it, and that everything in the finding was about to be reread through a single word, and the word was revenge. She reached for her sleeve, and Min Woo-seo stood up. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He said that the finding on his position was correct, that he had reviewed the underlying analysis himself, and that he would have reached the same conclusion. He said that his separation from the committee lead had been his decision alone,
executed on his authority, and that Director Owusu had played no part in it and had not been consulted about it and had not been given a reason for it. Then he turned and looked at Jion for the first time. He said that if anyone at this table had a concern about Director Owusu's authority, they could bring it to him directly, now, in this room, in front of the chairman. He said nobody else here had earned the right to speak about how she left this company. He sat down. The session ran another 40 minutes. Nobody raised it again. Afterwards, in the corridor, Nanaya caught up with him and asked him why he had done that, and he said that the finding was correct. She said that was not what she asked. He put both hands flat on the file he was carrying and said he was late for something, and he walked away from her down the corridor, and she stood there in the light from the window and felt for the first time in 7 months something in her chest that was not anger and that she did not want to look at directly. That night, she did not go home. She went to Abina's flat in No One and sat on the floor with her back against the sofa and did not say anything for 20 minutes. And Abina did not ask. She just made tea and put it on the floor beside her and sat down close enough that their shoulders were nearly touching. When Abina finally spoke, she said she had written the line that ended his career, and she had meant it. And it was true, and she would write it again. Abina said she knew. Nanaya said that he had stood up in front of 11 people and defended her, and she did not understand it, and that it would have been so much easier if he had fought her, if he had been petty, if he had been anything at all except this, and that she had spent 7 months building something to hold, and he kept refusing to hold still long enough for her to put it down on him. Abina said that sounded exhausting. Nanaya said it was. Then she put her face in her hands and stayed there for a long time without making any sound at all. And Abina did not touch her and did not say a single comforting thing because she had known her for 9 years and she knew that Nanaya did not want to be comforted. She wanted to be witnessed. And those are different jobs. After a while, Nanaya lifted her head and said she needed to find out what he had been looking for in that box of files. She tried the direct route first because she was still, underneath everything, a person who believed that the correct way to obtain a document is to request it. She submitted a records access request through courier system for all Diane compliance material dated September and December of the previous year. It came back in 90 minutes, denied, sealed under a retention hold. The reference number was provided, no further detail available, and the denial was logged automatically to the file owner, which meant that somebody now knew she had looked. She found out who on the Friday when Jiun Han stopped by her office at the end of the day with a question about the review timetable that Jiun did not need answered, and asked it, and got the answer, and then stood in the doorway a moment longer than the conversation required. She said she hoped Nanaya was settling in. She said the 11th floor could be a difficult place to arrive into, especially with history, and that people here had long memories and not all of them were kind, and that if anything at all came up, anything, she should feel free to come to her first before it became formal. She laughed one syllable with her mouth closed and said, "Good weekend." Nanaya sat in the dark office afterwards and understood 2 things at once. The first was that the compliance material from the autumn was sealed rather than archived, and sealed is a decision somebody makes. The second was that Jion Han just very warmly, in the politest possible language, told her to stop. She did not stop. But she did stop using the system, and she started thinking instead about who in that building had been employed long enough and was close to retirement to have nothing left worth protecting. She was still working through that list on the Thursday when Director Bak knocked on her door. Let me ask you something before we go further, because we are about to hit the part of this story that changes everything, and I want your answer before you have it. If you were her, would you dig? You have your job, you have your authority, you have your finding, and the man who destroyed you in public just defended you in public, and every instinct you have says there is something underneath it. Do you go looking, or do you leave it buried and take the win? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I do not think this one is obvious. Now let us get into it. She did not have to dig in the end. Director Bak came to her. He was De Jong's compliance officer, 61 years old, 4 months from retirement, a man who had spent 30 years in a job whose entire purpose was to notice things and say nothing about them. He asked her for 15 minutes on a Thursday afternoon, and he brought a folder with him, and he did not sit down. He said he was going to give her something, and that he was giving it to her rather than to the committee, because giving it to the committee would end 3 careers, including his own, and that he had decided he could live with one of those outcomes and not the other. Then he put the folder on her desk and said it concerned an internal audit that had been opened in October and closed in November. Nanaya had been terminated in November. The audit had been opened on a routine trigger, a variance in the 11th floor's authorization records, and it had found, within 3 weeks, a set of 9 capital approvals totaling $41 million that had been pushed through outside the normal workflow. The approvals carried a signature record. The signature record was hers. She had never seen any of them. She read that page 4 times. Her hands did not shake. She noticed that they did not shake, and it frightened her more than shaking would have, because it meant her body had gone somewhere ahead of her mind and was waiting there. The audit had a scope. The scope covered current employees at grade 9 and above in the capital approvals function. It had a cutoff date of the 14th of November, at which point the scope would be fixed and every name inside it would be referred to the Financial Supervisory Service as a matter of course, and a referral of that kind takes between 2 and 5 years to resolve, and a person referred does not work again in the meantime, in Korea or anywhere else, whatever the eventual finding. Min-woo Seo had terminated her on the 12th, 2 days before the scope closed, in front of 200 people, in the most public and most documented way available to him. Because a quiet termination would have looked like a negotiated exit, and a negotiated exit inside an open audit window is itself a red flag, and the only version of her departure that could not be read as an arrangement was one that humiliated her. He had made himself the reason. He had made himself look like a man who fired a black woman in front of the whole company for no reason at all. And he had let the market draw the only available conclusion. And he had let her draw it too. And he had never once corrected it, because correcting it meant explaining the audit. And explaining the audit meant putting her name back inside a scope that closed without it. Director Bak said he had told him it would destroy her career. He said Min-woo had answered that a destroyed career can be rebuilt in 3 years, and a referral cannot be rebuilt at all, and that she would hate him, and that this was an acceptable price, and that Director Bak was to close the file and never speak of it. Nanaya sat in her office with the folder open in front of her and the window going dark, and she did not move for 40 minutes. She thought about the lift doors. She thought about the third interviewer writing something down. She thought about 11,000 won a week on the heating and the 400,000 won review and her mother asking about the weather. She thought about 7 months of a specific, useful, load-bearing anger that she had built her recovery on top of, and she understood that the foundation had just been removed and the building was still standing, and she did not yet know what it was standing on. Then she turned to the 9th page and looked at the authorization records again, at the entries beside her forged signature, at the terminal identifiers, at the times. Every one of the 9 approvals had been authorized from the same workstation. She knew whose it was. She did not confront her. That was the thing Jiyeon had not planned for, because Jiyeon had spent 6 weeks preparing for a confrontation and had a version of herself ready for it, warm and wounded and entirely deniable, and Nanaya gave her nothing to use. Instead, she went to Chairman Rowe and asked for one thing. She asked that the final committee session be open to the full De Jong leadership, all of it, everyone at grade 9 and above, in the auditorium on the ground floor. Chairman Rowe asked her why. She said the finding concerned the conduct of the capital approvals function and that the function's leadership should hear it from the committee directly rather than in a memo. He looked at her for a moment, and then he said yes.
Jeon heard about the venue change on the Monday and understood immediately that something had moved, and she did what people like Jeon always do when the ground shifts, which is to escalate before the shift completes. She filed a formal objection with Korea's ethics office on the Tuesday. It alleged that Director Owusu had accessed sealed compliance material without authority, that she had done so to construct a retaliatory finding, and that her appointment had been improper from the beginning. It was 7 pages long, and it was extremely well written, and it named Director Beck as a witness. It was also, as an act, an admission, because there were only 4 people in the entire company who knew that the October audit file existed at all, and one of them had just told the ethics office about it in writing. Nanaya read the objection in her office at 8 in the morning, and she felt something in her go very quiet and very level. She forwarded it to Chairman Rowe without comment, then she added it to the appendix of the final finding. The auditorium held 240. It was full. She had thought about that number on the way down. 200 people had watched her leave this company. She had not planned the symmetry. It had simply arrived, and she noticed as she walked to the front that she did not feel triumphant about it. She felt the way you feel before an examination you have prepared for completely. Chairman Rowe opened the session. Then he handed it to her. She stood at the same podium. She did not use the microphone stand. She held the microphone in her hand, and she was aware of the weight of it, and she straightened the cuff of her left sleeve, and she began. She presented the finding first. All of it, the valuation revision, the 11 redundancies, the dissolution of the approvals function. She read the line about Minwoo Seo's position out loud, in front of him, in front of everyone, without softening it, because it was true and because softening it would have made everything after it look like sentiment. Then she turned to the appendix. She laid out the October audit. She laid out the 9 approvals and the $41 million and the forged signature record. She named the workstation. She named the terminal identifier and the 9 timestamps and the person to whom that workstation was assigned for the whole of the relevant period. She did not raise her voice once. She had learnt that from him. Jeon stood up somewhere around the 4th minute and said something about process, and Chairman Rowe, without turning his head, said, "Sit down." Nanaya kept going. She read the ethics objection into the record, the one filed the previous Tuesday, and she pointed out that its author described the contents of a compliance file that its author had no lawful means of knowing existed, and she let that sit in the room for exactly as long as it needed to sit. Then she said the last part. She said that 7 months ago, she had been terminated in a room very like this one, and that everybody present had drawn a conclusion about why, and that a number of people in this building had said the word diversity to her face since she returned, and had smiled while they said it, and that she had let it pass every time. She said she was not going to let it pass now. She said the record would show that the analysis in front of them was hers, that the valuation was hers, that the finding was hers, and that she had built all of it in 90 days inside a company that had thrown her out of the front door, and that anyone in the room who needed a reason for her seniority now had 90 pages of it. Nobody moved. Then she said the thing she had decided in the lift on the way down, which was that the termination of her employment on the 12th of November had been executed for the purpose of removing her name from an audit scope before its cutoff date, that it had cost the man who executed it his reputation and had cost her 7 months of her life, and that she had not been consulted, and that it had been the correct decision. She looked at the far end of the second row. Minwoo Seo was sitting very still with both hands flat on his knees.
The Financial Supervisory Service referral went out the following week with one name on it. Jeon Han was suspended on the Thursday and dismissed on the following Monday, and the whole thing was in the trade press by the end of the month, and she did not work in Korean finance again. Nanaya's finding was adopted in full. All 11 redundancies stood. Min-woo Seo's position was dissolved on the last day of the 90 days, exactly as written, because she had never once considered changing it, and he had never once asked her to. He came to her office on his final afternoon to return his building pass. They stood there for a while without saying much. She asked him whether he had ever intended to tell her, and he said no. She asked why not, and he said that if she had known, she would have gone back into the scope voluntarily to clear her name, because that was exactly the kind of thing she would do, and the scope would have closed with her inside it. She said she had no right to make that choice for her.
He said he knew. He said he had known at the time and had made it anyway, and that he was not going to stand in her office on his last day and pretend it had been anything other than what it was, which was a decision he had taken about her life without asking her, and that she was entitled to hate him for it for as long as she wanted. She said she did not hate him. He said that was worse, and something moved across his face that she had never seen on it before. And then he put the building pass on her desk and said, "Goodbye, Director Owusu." She let him get to the door. Then she said his name, and he stopped. And she said that Koyo's Ghana office opened in March, that it needed someone who understood approval architecture, that the role reported to her, and that she was not offering it out of gratitude. She was offering it because she had read his answers for 90 days, and he was the best structural mind she had ever worked next to. She said he had until the 1st to decide. He stood in the doorway with his hand on the frame and did not turn around for a long moment. Then he said that Accra was very far from Seoul. She said that she knew, and that she had done it once already, in the other direction, and that it was survivable. He left without answering. On the 1st of the month, Nanaya Owusu sat down at her desk and opened her inbox, and there was one message in it, sent at 4 minutes past midnight, and it contained a single word. So tell me honestly, are you Team Nanaya or Team Min-woo? Because I have gone back and forth on this the entire time I was writing it, and I still do not know. He saved her career by destroying it, and he never let her choose, and I want to know whether you can forgive that, or whether you think she should have let him walk out of that door. Say it in the comments, one word, Team Nanaya or Team Min-woo, and let us see where this channel actually stands. And there is one more thing, because I have not forgotten it, and neither should you. Director Bak closed that audit file early. He was ordered to, and the order did not come from Min-woo Seo, and Nanaya does not know that yet. And the person who gave it is still sitting in that building on a floor above hers. That is part 2, and it is already written. If this one got you, hit that like button so the algorithm knows to show it to somebody else who needs it, and subscribe with the notification bell on so you do not miss the second part. Tell me in the comment where you are watching from, and tell me the exact moment you changed your mind about Min-woo, because I know there was one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next story.